Merkel Media.
I'm exhausted, looking for everything in the shadows. Start looking at people like they don't matter. I'm waking up to the fact, more than a little bit shallow. I'm lost in this hole, but I don't wanna. I'm lost in this hole, 'cause I'm just trying to
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Free the Rabbits. We got a very interesting episode today. We're going to talk specifically about Mount Graham, and I've got one of my good friends, Billy from Permaculture P.I.M.P.cast, and he has got his own personal story when it comes to Mount Graham, and it's pretty wild. But if you can, Billy, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I guess I'll kick it off. I'm Billy, one half of the dynamic duo from Permapastures Farm. We're in Western North Carolina. In fact, at the very epicenter where that manufactured hurricane came through October last year. And believe it or not, we're still, to some extent or another, still digging out from it. I mean, we're still finding stuff that we didn't even know happened way back when. But our claim to fame is basically it's evolving, and it has been for some time. But essentially, our YouTube channel and our podcast, we discuss permaculture, preparedness, practical living, and sometimes prostitutes. Maybe even the paranormal when we get Joel Thomas on from time to time. But we cover it all, and it's a weird space that we're in right now because. And I made this prediction. As soon as Trump got in, we figured that a lot of people in the homestead space and a lot of people in the preparedness space would go right back into the matrix, and they have. So the audience is somewhat acquiesced despite the fact that everything's still going up. You got shrinkflation in the store. It's harder to feed your family than it's ever been. But a lot of people went back into the matrix, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it's given me an opportunity to pivot into some things that really mean a lot to me. And that's in terms of circadian biology, circadian health. So that's another little facet that has been fascinating for me, for the longest time. I don't think it takes anybody in the audience to realize that, they're poisoning us from the sky, from the water, from the food we eat. And our goal is to get everybody as far away from that as possible. And so, thinking that I was decentralized in just about every part of my life, I had a big slap in the face, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, realizing that, if anybody is running their animals and their farm more decentralized than we do, then I don't know who that is. But I was missing a big part of the equation, and that means myself. So that means spending way more time in the sun, spending way more time in nature. You would think as a farmer, we would normally do that, but typically most farmers do all of their work in the morning and in the evening, but we miss some of the vital sunlight that, which is medicine to me. In fact, I probably look a couple of shades darker than the last time you saw me. So, it's, even though the audience is pretty much acquiesced away from, farming and how to produce your own food, it's given me an opportunity to kind of stretch my wings in another way And that's where we are right now. So it's a combination of all of the above.
Hey guys, thank you so much for being here on YouTube with myself and all the other free range rabbits. We have just recently started Free the Rabbits merchandise with our touch grass shirts, rabbit logo tees and hats, Nephilim Portal Baby tees, and our brand new Puck Wudgie Tube shirts available in all sizes with several color options. Also, for the people who've been asking how they can donate to the show financially, we have several ways to do so. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/freetherabbits where we have monthly memberships, or you can give a one-time donation. If you are following on YouTube, we also have memberships there with different tiers, all of which have custom emojis you can use while on the channel. And if you can't donate financially, just you donating your time is the best gift possible to the show. And for that, thank you so much. Keep sharing the show, everyone. Now, let's get back into it. Yeah, that's awesome, guys. And bringing up this manufactured storm, which I'm in the same boat with you guys on this one for sure. Definitely manufactured. There was too many twists and turns throughout that entire thing that went down over there, right? It was just way too much. As a matter of fact, I think I told you, William, off air after you recorded that episode with Tony, that you really shed some light on some things that I hadn't heard, particularly at the time, where I was way more receptive to it being manufactured. Because one of the things I try to do on my show is have a balanced approach, even to conspiracies. Because one thing that I find a lot of times is people think everything's something, everything's fake, everything's this. And while I do completely believe in the government's ability to manufacture storms, I don't think every storm is manufactured, but I think we can look to certain tells that happen in the aftermath of storms to show us whether or not that's actually the case. And I believe without a shadow of a doubt that this particular one it was. And I think that there was a lot to gain from manufacturing something like that for the government. And the fact that you guys were a big part of helping with that was awesome as well. And I really appreciate you both for what you did there. And you guys, what you do to help other people, like you said, going in, showing people how to take care of the land that they may have just dumped a bunch of animals on and don't have a clue what they're doing is also good too.
Well, Joel, if I could speak to that point, just real quick.
Sure.
And then I guess we could put bookends on it, but I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you exactly what we found out, because unlike everybody else out there, the local government around the Asheville area told everybody, oh, everything's fine. It's a little bit high on this and that and this. Well, of course, we didn't buy it. So we went out there, spent about initially $10,000 of our own money to go out here, and you would not believe how difficult it is just to find environmental engineers that will give you honest results and that can find an honest lab. Here's how bad it is. You may have heard of Dane Wigington of geoengineeringwatch.org. Dane just happens to be a friend of mine. And I reached out to him and I'm like, Dane, I need a lab, man, and I need one bad. They're telling everybody this river's just fine. You can go down there, you can smell it. We have cadaver dogs that are dying. We got all kinds of crazy stuff going on around here. A lady had her sheep down by the river. Half her flock are dead. Goats are dying left and right. And meanwhile, there's a local NGO called Mountain True. And of course, they were telling, oh, it's just fine. Everything's cool. So we spent $10,000 of our own money to go get some lab scientists in here, some environmental engineers in here. And in addition to that, we had Dr. Will Spencer come in on his own dime to do testing as well. And in fact, I had just gotten on Twitter. And I still barely have a footprint there, but I had just gotten on Twitter and I posted one of the first videos I put was a little, maybe 30 seconds short of Dr. Will giving his results of what he found down there by that river. And I'll quote him. And he said, you know what? This place rivals Chernobyl. That's how bad. He was looking at his satellite data and it was so bad that he didn't believe it. So he came on the ground and he found out the entire region was polluted. So when I'm bouncing and kicking it back and forth with Dane Wigington, I think that the prevailing hypothesis is that they used a lot of geoengineering prior to the storm getting here. And there was a lot of weird things that happened prior to it. And then, of course, these particles intertwine into the storm system, and then they use the next rad radar towers to steer this thing wherever they want. So we got the equivalent of 2 years worth of all of the water that goes over Niagara Falls in about 2 hours. And so the death toll, they're lying about, long story short, they're lying about everything. But here's what our test revealed is that not only were they lying about it, they were lying in the most unbelievable way. Every single toxin, and we had 3 different lab reports, one from us, well, actually 2 from us, one from Dr. Will, one from the environmental engineers we hired, and then also Bear Independent from Grindstone Ministries hired an entirely different company, no affiliation with us at all, and they all revealed the very same thing. Everything from nuclear radiation to you name it. Nobody could seem to come up with it. But to William's point, on a good note, here we are, I'd say about a month ago, we just revealed the latest results. And using exactly what William talked about, which is a combination of our biocomplete compost in addition to some of the product that we got from Dr. Will Spencer, we've proven that in our test sites, all of them are better than you could literally eat on the ground within a football field of the places that we didn't. That's how clean it is now. And we did it in 6 months. And this is a process that would ordinarily take you years to get done. So combining the extremophiles that we got from Dr. Will Spencer, in addition to the biocomplete, we mixed them. We took all of the macro things in the soil that you'll find. That's what you'll find in our compost, and all of the micro things that you need an electron microscope to see that we got from Dr. Will Spencer. We combined them all to see what would happen. We had some test plots. We went out there, and inside of 6 months, half of that's in time where, it's really not beneficial for the microbes. Long story short, we do have a decentralized way to clean this place up. And, it's like William said, it really goes back to the good Lord put everything out here on the planet. It's just a matter of assembling the right things and getting it together. So that's exactly what we've done. So sorry, I didn't mean to take us sideways, but I did want to say that there is some good news to come out of this, is that we are the only people that have come up with a decentralized way of healing this soil that doesn't involve buying chemicals from Monsanto or Bayer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know William spoke to a little bit of it during that podcast he did with Tony. And yeah, I'm not mad that you broke away and talked about this for a little bit, because I wanted you guys to talk up front about what you do. And I'm glad you shed a little bit more light on what's been going on after that storm. And to that point, there's definitely been a push in certain areas for the government to acquiesce land, right? And one of the ways to do that is to control certain things that you think that you couldn't control, right? I.e. the weather. So I do think, and I like the way that you worded that this storm's coming. A lot of times it's not necessarily a storm they manufacture, which I do think they can do that as well. But sometimes it's just moving a storm in just the way that they need it to, or ramping it up, something that's already moving. They can add certain things to it to allow that to happen. So I'm glad you did speak on it. And I'm really glad both you guys were, boots on the ground there helping out with that. That was phenomenal work. And the fact that you were able to turn around some of these properties within 6 months is mind blowing.
No, I appreciate it, Joel. The good thing is, the bad thing is that, we have all the data out there. It's Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Katrina, all these other ones. We have overwhelming data at this point that all of them were steered or put into place. Like Harvey just sat in the same spot. If we know anything about nature, everything is in flux. Everything moves. Very few things stay perfectly still, except for the land you're standing on. Outside of that, every single system, every life support system on this planet is always in flux. That's why it's called the weather. It's not just one temperature. Things are always moving, even though you may not detect it. There are things always moving. So when you see a storm that jumped completely over Florida for the most part, and everywhere from Florida all the way up to Western North Carolina, and then all of a sudden decides, oh, I'm going to stay right here. I'm not going to move. And then all of a sudden it just dumps. It was so unbelievable, the damage that unfolded. The body count is, so many magnitudes higher than what they've officially said. But like I said, I mean, the good news is that we do have if any good was to come out of all this, because when it happened, I was thinking, man, the toxicity is off the level. And what are we going to do? Had no idea that the good Lord was already preparing me for the work that we were going to do, the remediation work, because that was really not my field. But we had everything we already needed. We had all the training. We'd worked with all the experts. We had already had all of it out there. We just didn't know that we did. So there was a few other people that kind of pushed us in the right way. But there was a lot of weird, crazy stuff that came out of the woodwork too, bro. When we were starting to announce on YouTube, some of the progress that we were making, all of a sudden some weird people come out of the woodwork, and all of a sudden there's only one time in my life I've ever been bribed where somebody attempted to bribe me, and it was during this time. And long story short, it was a woman who came out of nowhere along with two other guys that wanted to do a Zoom call. And basically, okay, you tell me what this sounds like to you, bro. When they say, hey, man, we've heard about the kind of work you're doing. We know you're working with Dr. Will Spencer, but hey, we want you to work with us. How much is it going to cost? And I'm like, what? What do you mean, how much is it going to cost? They're like, yeah, for you to come work with us. I'm like, well, tell me what you're doing. So they give me this nebulous excuse as to how this product, first of all, I know about it and I know that it doesn't work as well as what I'm currently doing. And they're like, and I basically said, look, I appreciate your consideration, but I'm just not interested. Then finally the guy tells me, and if I told you who they said they were working with or who they were getting their money from, there's not a person in your audience that wouldn't know who I'm talking about. And then he finally said, look, how much is it going to take? And I'm like, what do you mean, what's it going to take? How much is it going to take? Take for what? And then finally, I'm starting to get impatient with these people. I'm like, look, just cut to the chase, man. I got things to do. I got chicken burning. So you need to tell me what's up. They said, we got deep pockets. How much is it going to take? And I'm like, oh, I get it. So you want me to sell my soul, huh? You want me to be Judas out here and let my grandbaby play out here in a toxic mess because you're going to have me work with some junk that I know ain't going to get the job done? Have a nice day. Sayonara. So, there was a lot of seedy weirdos that came up out of here. But, the good thing about it is, A, I'm not suicidal. B, all of it's been put out there. So bumping me off ain't going to do any good. We've already told the whole world how to do this. So, yeah. I mean, so the good thing is at the end of the day, we do have some decentralized ways to make this happen. And it goes right back to what, compost. That is the backbone, making really, really awesome biocomplete compost. And then if you have the benefit of doing it, adding in some extremophiles that you can get from Dr. Will. And it's really that simple. So,
But I do want to get into a little bit about what Mount Graham is, what's on Mount Graham now, and some of the interesting things around it. And as we're going through it, obviously, you've got a lot to give as well because you've done a lot of reading on the subject even prior to you going out there. But also, you have some very personal stories that are very interesting. And I thought that my audience would really like to hear this, especially when it gets to some of the weirder stuff surrounding the VATT telescope and the Lucifer telescope and several of the things that are going on up there. But Mount Graham, for people that don't know, it's a mountain. It's in Graham County, Arizona, in the United States. And it's northeast from Tucson. So people that are wanting to know the location of that, that's exactly where it's located. It's actually in the Pinaleño Mountains. So it's the tallest mountaintop there. It's above 10,000 feet. But what's interesting, though, Billy, is this mountain isn't the tallest mountain in Arizona. And one of the things that several other researchers were talking about when they went to acquiesce this mountain to put these telescopes up there, because there's multiple telescopes up there, it's not just one. And when they went to do that, the question was, well, why didn't they go to one of the other mountaintops that would have been taller in the state of Arizona? You've got Humphreys Peak, you've got Baldy Peak, you've got Escondida Mountain. All of these are there and they're taller than Mount Graham. So then we have to start looking a little deeper and say, well, why did they pick Mount Graham? Well, there's several reasons we're going to get into when we get into the weirder aspects of it. But one of the interesting things, just right out the gate, and I don't know if you know about this, And this is super weird. And as I got down this rabbit hole of all the weird stuff going on around this mountain, this was one of the weird ones because I hadn't really heard about this. But there's this monastery. It's called St. Pius Orthodox Monastery, and it's at the bottom of this mountain. And it's an Eastern Orthodox Christian women's community in Arizona, and it follows the traditional Serbian monastic lifestyle. But what's interesting about this Eastern Orthodox monastery, it wasn't accredited by any of the Russian Orthodox churches. It just started. So it eventually became roped into the umbrella of the Russian Orthodox Church. And at that point, they acquiesced 320 acres of land. And it's actually the fifth largest monastery among 80 of American Orthodox Christian monasteries in the US. So that was mind blowing enough. I'm saying, okay, so what's the connection here? What's the weird stuff here, right? Because there's this monastery that didn't start from traditional orthodoxy that became an Orthodox church. So what's the story behind it? So in 1995, they started bringing in these teenage girls, and these girls come in to study and live this monastic lifestyle, but they're not monks, right? They're not nuns. So they're just living the lifestyle, but they're there to learn. They're there to go to school. Well, what's interesting about that, Billy, is when I started digging further, there's all these controversies that have been coming out since these girls started going to the school. Matter of fact, there's all these accusations of spiritual abuse, financial mismanagement. There's all of these conversion tactics similar to a cult when they bring these girls in. I found this interesting Reddit thread, and I don't always trust Reddit, but this particular thread kept coming up in the research I was doing. And it was a thread where there were girls who had went to school there who were coming there to talk about all of the crazy stuff that had happened to them while they were there. And they basically said the abbess, or as she calls herself, the eldress, she treated herself like a god over these girls. And they abused them, spiritually, physical abuse, child labor. They said they didn't even learn anything at the school while they were there. They were just basically used as child labor. They had arranged marriages, all kind of crazy stuff. Even sexual abuse was coming out of this particular place. So I dig further, and one of the girls that went to school there started talking about the origination of this particular monastery actually came from this order called the Holy Order of Mans. Now, this is where it gets real interesting because this starts tying directly into all the weird stuff that's going on Mount Graham. So the Holy Order of Mans was actually incorporated in 2012, which 2012, and you know, just like I do, 2012 is a weird year for a lot of weird stuff. But it's a non-denominational, non-sectarian, spiritual mystic school. So the Holy Order of Mans was a mystic school. So we're looking at a mystery school, essentially. And it was started by Wilbur Blyton in 1968. And he was an electrical engineer, but he also had a background in the Roman Catholic Church, but also New Thought, which was New Age movement, and Rosicrucian order. So he was a part of this whole Rosicrucian movement, and he was also a Freemason. Shocker. So he's big into Christ consciousness and the esoteric teachings of the great Christ, the Master Jesus. We can all become Christ. And he starts this Holy Order of Mans. Well, they start getting a lot of heat because they're essentially a cult. And people start saying that, well, this isn't a good thing. We want to push back against this. So what they end up doing, they end up rolling the Holy Order of Mans into Eastern Orthodoxy, and they create what they call the Christ the Savior Brotherhood, which is now around today, and it's called the CSB. And so this Holy Order of Mans gets rolled into Eastern Orthodoxy and becomes this Christ the Savior Brotherhood, which is a Gnostic order of Christ. Well, it gets even wilder because not only is this tied into Masonic groups and Catholic influences, but also he is tied in with the Jesuits as well, which we know the Jesuits are also a part of these telescopes, specifically the VATT that's on top of Mount Graham. Well, it gets better. How about the fact that this Holy Order of Mans, which has now changed its name, which is roped into Eastern Orthodoxy, specifically administers St. Pius Missionary School there and the youth camps at that monastery. So we've not only that, he is also, Blyton was tied into, check this, UFO groups. So we've got this guy who started this Holy Order of Mans that changes it because he's getting heat, moves into this Eastern Orthodoxy school, and they actually started this St. Pius school, this monastery at the bottom of Mount Graham, and this 320 acres that they've acquiesced around it already before the telescopes even get put there, Billy.
You know, I'm blown away. I'm chomping at the bit, bro, because you have no idea what I'm about to tell you right now. So
go ahead, I'm ready.
Bro, I'm sitting here working in Safford. Let me tell you why I'm even there to begin with. Being, what we do in permaculture, I'm trying to learn. We spend a fair amount of money on education. So I was like, man, I've always wanted to build one of those earth ships, as you well know. And so, we sent William away. Instead of sending him off to college, we sent him off to the Earthship Academy. And then he went back and then he greened the high desert in Taos, New Mexico. Well, I wanted to put my hands on one too. And the only place that they had one going at that time was in Safford, Arizona, which happens to be, if I'm not mistaken, about northeast of Mount Graham, of the center of in fact, from where I was, bro, it was 6 miles from where I was standing to the observatory. And from 6 miles away, you could still see that thing. Well, check this out. When I get over there, you're kind of getting to know everybody. And most of the people on these Earthship crews are all volunteers, and they're all hippies, and a lot of drug and alcohol stuff going on there, things I'm not into, but you're going to attract that sort of bohemian vibe. Well, it turns out that the guy whose Earthship we were building, I don't want to say his name, but his father-in-law was the guy in charge of that monastery you're talking about, right?
No.
So, it gets crazier. It gets crazier. So this guy, and he's not initially from the United States. I don't want to say, I want to keep his privacy because this is the kind of guy that sticks out like a sore thumb. But let's just say he's initially from Scandinavia, but his wife is an American. So anyway, his father-in-law is basically the prior, I would say, of this entire place. Had no idea about it, had no idea what they did. Well, as people were kind of getting to know one another, they realized that, man, I'm totally into self-sufficiency, growing my own food. And then every day for lunch, they would bring out either a vegetarian meal, which is all good for those so inclined, but bro, I eat meat. So I would go every day to lunch. I'd go to town, go find me some bomb burrito place, go get some of that, and then come on back. So every day, these nuns, not nuns, but there was only, in fact, as I understand it, there was only one prior of this entire place, and the rest of the staff was women. So all of a sudden, bro, you're not going to believe this. I was asking, I just kind of said it tongue in cheek one day because I was like, well, how do they, they got a convent over there, they got all this land. How are they feeding themselves? And then the guy's wife, who owns this Earthship, says, well, my dad kind of runs the whole place out there. And I'd seen him on the site a couple of times, and he had made some off remarks about women working in construction on this project because, frankly, the women were outworking the men in this Earthship project. I kid you not. So I said, well, man, I'd love to come out there and look and see when they found out I was the Permaculture Pimp Daddy, they're thinking, oh, man, let's have this guy come on out here and maybe you can help us out with some stuff. And I'm like, absolutely. So every Sunday we took off. Every Sunday, the Earthship, well, actually, it was Saturday and Sunday. I don't recall if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, but anyway, they invited us to come out there. They invited everybody to come out there, but they made it very, very, very clear that if you are a female and you go on that property, you're going to have to stop at the visitor center. And bro, they got like a wall all the way around this place. And at the time, I didn't think nothing about it. But when I get up there, you get to the visitor spot and then they come out, somebody comes get you, you go in there and all the women, bro, they got basically this giant, I don't know what you call it. It's a box that has like women's clothing in it. All the girls, and like I said, these are some hippie chicks out here, bro. And none of them have taken a bath in a week. So that ain't helpful jumping in my vehicle. So anyway, bro, they make them all dress up. And I hope I still got pictures of this. They make them dress up, but they don't look like they're not nuns, but they look like nuns. I'll put it that way. They're dressed that way. And half these girls, man, you could smell the alcohol coming right off of them. And I'm like, oh man, this ain't going to go well. So anyway, we're over here going through a tour and I'm trying and I'm just like, man, I hope these girls keep it together. There was one girl that was still bombed on whatever drug she was on. And she's saying a lot of inappropriate things and just not cool. So anyway, they're taking us through a tour through this thing and I'm wanting to see the food systems. I'm like, they take us to this chapel. Okay, that's cool. And everything seems out of place. Then we go over to the food systems and I don't recall because I'm asking the lady who's leading the tour, she's talking about all this historical stuff, which I found cool, but it was a bunch of art like from the Middle Ages, and it's just not my cup of tea, you know? So I'm like, okay, yeah, well and good. So let's go look at the food system. So finally we come up on their greenhouses, which in that kind of environment, you have to grow nearly everything under plastic. So bro, we get up in there and I go through one greenhouse and I'm like, okay, this is very I didn't say it audibly, but I'm thinking, man, this is the most unimpressive thing I've ever seen. I'm like, I don't know how you're feeding this many people out here with what I'm looking at. And then they take me to another one and then another one. And I'm like, okay, there wasn't enough food that I saw there to feed 10 people. And I'm pushing it when I say 10. So we get through there, we go through the whole 9 yards. And I'd already been through this experience at Mount Graham at this point. I'd already called you on the phone, bro, after what went down at the Discovery Center, which we'll get to in a minute, I'm sure. And I started asking questions about Mount Graham. And all of a sudden, bro, mum's the word. It's like, it's time for y'all to roll. And that was the second time that happened to me, bro. I had no idea you were going to bring this up right now, but yeah, I was absolutely on that premises. And they insisted that we dress appropriately. And it was like every time we would see a woman, even though the majority of the people on this, it was me, one other guy, and the rest were females. I think maybe 6 or 7 in total. There may have been 7 of us in total. And every time it was a woman beyond the mother superior or whatever she would have been, her equivalents, it was like wherever they'd see us, they would like stop where they were and go in the opposite direction because I'm wanting to talk to some of these folks and say, but they just wouldn't allow us to talk to anybody. So, I mean, you're providing a whole lot of backbone of flesh to this thing. But honestly, to this day, I have no idea how these people could have possibly been feeding themselves in such a inhospitable environment. Believe me, you can have food systems in a desert that makes sense. But I didn't see anything out there that made a whole lot of sense to me. Certainly no way of feeding all those people, supposedly all those people, because I never saw more than 10 people on the entire premises.
Well, it makes sense because the women that I saw that were coming out talking about this place, they said that they went to the authorities and they were going to government officials trying to get someone to come out there and nobody would. That's the crazy thing. It was being silenced even from the women that left that were no longer a part of the monastery. So interestingly enough, again, as I track it back, the entire monastery, even though it's got this facade of this Eastern Orthodox Christianity that it's supposedly built on, it's actually not. And it goes back to Blyton. I mean, we're talking a mixture of the Jesuits, the Franciscans, all the beliefs from those 2 organizations. And then you've got Hindu traditions, Rosicrucianism, Catholicism. He's even mixing in New Age UFO ideology in with it as well. All that helped create this monastery there. So it's not mind-blowing to me that they shut you up when you started talking about it, because there's way more going on there at that monastery than's being let onto the public. As a matter of fact, the girls that were in there don't even know what they were there for, really. They were
Wow.
just basically, they said slave labor while they were there. They didn't even really have schooling. They said they were supposed to go there for schooling. So it would be similar to sending a child off to a boarding school. That's what it's set up for, because just because you get sent off there as, a young teenage girl doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be a nun, because they're just preparing you for life, supposedly, because they're also preparing these women for quote unquote marriage as well. But man, it was so mind blowing, like tracking back to how it actually started and then saying, well, this makes perfect sense, because everything else pumping out of Mount Graham has the same type of feeling. This UFO new age movement that's all through the mountain, even trickling all the way into the Vatican as well, which we're going to talk about today, and how that ideology is all mixed in with what the Vatican has been spewing for a while. But man, I'm actually blown away that you have a story about the monastery, because I just did the research and then you're like, well, by the way, I was there.
Oh, two more things, brother. I can't
Yeah.
believe I left this part out. Two more things. They made it very, very clear to us. You are not allowed to take pictures at all. The first time we see you take out your phone, you'll be on the first thing smoking off this property. That was number one. And then I asked, because nobody, the rest of them were so bombed or weren't really into it. I don't even know why they were there, to be honest with you, man, because honestly, I was the only one that was showing any interest in anything that this lady was talking about. And then before I started asking about Mount Graham and they sent me on my way, it was like, hey, you know what? I wonder why on earth do y'all have fencing all the way around this property? And then she's like, she paused. There was this, I do remember this like it was yesterday. It was like this long dramatic pause. And then she says, and she spoke so softly, um, it was disquieting. I know that sounds crazy to say that she had a way of speaking that was, if you weren't paying careful attention, you would not hear a word this lady was saying. Um, the chief, no, the queen bee or whatever they call them out there. So I had to ask her again because she made a response. I couldn't make it out. I couldn't understand it. I said, that's a lot of fence and there were places where there were like 8-foot chain link fences. And I'm like, why on earth? Why would y'all put a fence like that all the way around this place? And then it sounds like I said, she said something that I didn't understand. And then I asked again, and she says, well, we're a bunch of women here. That's what she said. And I'm like, hold on, you ain't all a bunch of women, because I know the dude in charge is like the father-in-law of the guy I'm working with right now on the property I'm working on. So anyway, it was bizarre. And I remember telling my wife when I got back from there, I was like, first of all, man, this was off. When I say off the beaten path, brother, I'm talking like, that's why I'm saying I don't know how anybody escaped, because it was far enough out that on foot, you're going to have some problems because everything is a dirt road around there and you don't travel well on a dirt road. And it was far enough off the beaten path that unless you escaped at night, I don't know. It was just odd, man, because I'm like, okay, it's not like you got cattle systems out here that require this protection. And if you did, you would have livestock dogs to look after them. You just didn't see any of that. It didn't make sense why they would have 8-foot fences around certain things. And then, of course, a lot of this is starting to come back to me now that you brought it up, because I never thought I'd ever actually speak of it again. But yeah, we were not allowed to take pictures, and they had no real good answer as to why you had fencing all the way around this place. So I'm like, okay, well, I can get through this. I didn't say this audibly, but I'm like, bro, with a set of bolt cutters, man, if I'm determined to get in here, bro, all I'd have to do is just clip right through. I don't understand it. And yeah, that was bizarre, but there was a lot of bizarre things that happened out in that place.
Yeah, that's really wild. I had no idea that you had an experience at the monastery. I'm pretty blown away. I'm glad that I found that weird rabbit hole about the monastery, because I just thought it was weird that there was a monastery right by the mountain. And I said, well, if there's a monastery by the mountain, I bet if I just look into it, there's something weird going on. And there was. And then come to find out you were there and it was weird stuff going on. So,
Yeah, bro. It was, I mean, honestly, looking back at it, I would love to. In fact, the only reason we were allowed to even go in there, apparently, they made us. There's a lot of this is coming back to me, but they had like a register book where you sign in from where you're from or wherever. And apparently, they have parishioners that are all over the way they told us is that they have parishioners all over the planet. And so they were signing these books, and I'm seeing people in, they're writing in a language that I didn't understand. I didn't know what it was. And it was apparently a very, I really don't understand what I was looking at there, because the people we were working with, the guy, the Scandinavian guy who immigrated here, who married the daughter of the prior of that place, not a very religious kind of guy at all. In fact, it was pretty evident by the way he would speak from time to time. And, but it was a very male dominated, chauvinistic. I mean, not to the point where, hey, I'm the guy, I'm going to go bring home the bacon, you fry it up in the pan kind of thing. The relationship, that near as I could tell, seemed like a very like, hey, you just, I don't know. The women just didn't seem like they were viewed upon very well. And it was disquieting. The whole place was weird, man. When I say weird, I mean, I've been to the desert before. I've been to the desert in the Middle East, but it had a strange vibe to it, man. It had a certain kind of beauty, like a palpable beauty that you can't. I was there in the wintertime, and it was just a weird kind of beauty that you can't explain. And at the same time, it was very foreboding, but also very desolate. It was very strange. But there were some other weird things that happened around that place too, especially with some of or at least one. Actually, I had several run-ins with the local Apaches around there. And yeah, nobody wants to talk about what's happening on Mount Graham, bro.
I'm telling you, and the more that I was digging into Mount Graham, I find that seems to be, from every angle, whoever you're asking, they don't want to talk about it. And I think we're going to dig in a little deeper here. And I want to talk about the Mount Graham International Observatory. And I want to get into a little bit of the telescopes, and just so people can understand a little background on what's going on up there, just from a scientific standpoint, just to set the tone. And then we can get into the really weird stuff. And obviously, one of the particular tools or instruments that's attached to the main telescope is called Lucifer. They actually call it Lucy now. It's interesting why they changed the name too. But the Mount Graham International Observatory, it's actually the research arm for the Department of Astronomy at the University of Arizona. So the University of Arizona is tied into this. Plus, there's several other universities that are also tied into this. A lot of them dumped money into it initially, because to build the LBT telescope, it was $100 million. And what's really wild is the University of Arizona and all of these other universities went against what the Apaches were trying to stop, which was unheard of at the time, because no university was ever known to do that. So there was a lot of money being funded from the government for these universities to do that. Plus, I'm sure that they threatened to pull any kind of subsidies from them if they didn't. I do know that and I live in Ohio, I know the University of Ohio State was supposed to dump like 13 million into it, but because of the heat, they ended up only putting in like 2.3 million or something like that. It was a big deal when this observatory was getting built, because you had not only the Apaches were fighting, and we'll talk about why that they were pushing back on it, but you also had all these conservation groups, because you got this red squirrel that's only located on these mountain ranges. And they were saying that, well, we need to look out for this particular wildlife. And there were some other wildlife on those mountains too that they brought up, but that was the main one. Here's what's really crazy is putting the observatory up there really didn't do much to the wildlife in general, right? That was a weird pushback. And what's interesting too, the university was getting dead squirrels sent to them for them to stop building it, which made no sense. Why were you killing those squirrels that you said you were there to protect? It's a whole wild battle that went on between multiple groups to stop this from happening. But Mount Graham International Observatory is on top of, obviously, Mount Graham, which is the tallest mountaintop in the Pinaleño Mountains. And it's a massive mountain range. And I'm sure you saw it. You were actually there. But they built this particular facility up there. And in this observatory, there's 3 facilities. You got the large binocular telescope, which is that LBT telescope I was talking about. It is actually better with the infrared lenses than the Hubble telescope, which is really interesting. You got the Heinrich Hertz submillimeter telescope, and that's operated by Arizona Radio Observatory. And then you got the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, and that's operated by the Vatican Observatory, and they call that one VATT. So the LBT was originally called the Columbus Project. That was the original name for it. And listen, the amount of universities and countries that were dumping money off into this was super wild. You had Ohio State, which I talked about. You had the University of Arizona, which I talked about. University of Virginia had Notre Dame that dumped money into it. Then you had Germany. Several institutions in Germany were dumping money into it. You had, obviously, the Vatican was dumping money into it. Italy dumping money into it. All these different countries and universities around the world dumping money into this. And why? Why would you pick this one place, Billy, to build this conglomerate of telescopes? It's not just one telescope there. And on top of that, these telescopes have multiple tools and multiple lenses that are involved with them too. So they're able to see a lot more than most telescopes in the world. And it's hard to wrap your mind around unless you start really looking into the supernatural aspect. And as we're going to get to the supernatural aspect, we have to talk about Lucifer. And here's what's wild, Billy. And I know you've seen this before, and I know you've read Exo Vaticana, and I have as well. What's weird about it being called Lucifer, it's not even a correct acronym. The actual full name is Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Spectroscopic Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactical Research. Those letters do not make up Lucifer. They just pulled out letters and said, well, we're going to call it Lucifer. And they got a lot of pushback from it when they first did it because nobody understood why they were doing it. And they didn't understand why the Vatican was signing off on this. And what ended up happening was they called it Lucifer for a while. And it got so much heat that in 2012, they actually changed it to Lucy, which I don't even think that's really helping because there's plenty of people that use the word Lucy to describe Lucifer. But what are your thoughts on that in that aspect? Because I just think it's very interesting that you have all of these organizations around the world interested in this one spot to put all of these telescopes.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because when you get down to why that real estate of all places, I mean, like Tom Horn and Chris Putnam wrote in Exo Vaticana, and of course they wrote the prior book, which was Petrus Romanus. Both of them were great books. And I think, now we can kind of say that Petrus Romanus was probably debunked because the last pope should have been the last pope. So we got one since, or actually 2 since. They wrote that book. But anyway, it was a powerful read. I want to say it came out in about 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. But anyway, in this book, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, and Tom did, I think, most of the heavy work and a lot of the research on this. But anyway, they describe, and I had it confirmed to me, that there are 7 holy mountains to native peoples on the planet. And Mount Graham is one of them. And in fact, among the Apache, it's one of 4 very holy mountains that are in the Apache's realm. And Mount Graham is like numero uno. And there ain't even a close second, not within it. And it stands for like big seated mountain, if you were to say it in the Apache language. Of course, I'm not even going to try to pronounce. But anyway, that realist, I'm sorry.
I can do it for you. It's
go knock yourself out, brother.
It's Dził Nchaa Sí'an is how you say it. But that is the Apache name for it. And it's actually spoken in the Western Apache language, which is Ndee biyati. And that's how you say the actual language part of it. But yeah, that is the name of the mountain, and it stands for Big Seated Mountain.
Yeah, so that's one of the things, but I tell you what, good luck trying to get any native person around there to talk about it. And there was only one time when I was able to, but I'll come to that in a minute. But when you think about the real estate in this place, there were other locations around there that were far better suited, far better suited. They were higher and they were in a better location and they would have been uncontested. Nobody would have said anything. But they had to have that mountain. And the Vatican leaned on the University of Arizona. State governments basically paid off all the sleazy politicians to let them give the okay. And the thing that, on a side note, you're like, okay, man, like these people haven't been screwed over enough, man. We got to sit here and go ahead and take what little they got left. And we've seen it over and over and over throughout American history, but I digress. They had to have that mountain. It's one of the holy mountains. It's one of the places where the locals believe that, there's a lot of spiritual stuff going on around there. And at least that was what I knew from the book until I had boots on the ground. Now, I had read the book long before I was ever, in fact, before I was going, it was my wife that pointed out to me. She says, hey, you're going to be real close to Mount Graham. And I'm like, say what? And I'm like, okay, I was going out here to build an earthship. Hey, I'm on another track now. Sadly, they will not let you go up there. You cannot take a tour in the winter. They won't let you. They say the mountain's impassable, which I find pretty tough to believe considering the fact that, they got to get those people up and down there some kind of way. And the mountain's not that tall. It's only 10,000 feet. So, I mean, come on. I mean, Pikes Peak is 14,110 feet. So you can get people up and down there, but somehow you can't get them up and down this one. But anyway, they won't let you up there in the winter. And everybody I would ask, whether I was going to a Walmart or to the local restaurant, because being there for 3 weeks and having a fair amount of downtime, I would try to interact with as many locals as I could. And I would try to get anybody who looked native or even close to it to talk to me about this thing. It was mum's the word until I go with the rest of the crew for lunch to go do karaoke. And there was this local bar where they had like steak day or whatever. So I went over there with the crew. And I was like, man, you know what? Let me just go ahead and try it. Like the Romans say, man, in vino veritas, man, in wine there is truth. Let me see what I can find out here. So inside this place, there was this lady, it was a large Native American lady, and she was sitting back there with this guy. There was a shuffleboard table there, and I'm just kind of killing time waiting on my food. And I said, hey, so y'all from around here? They're like, yeah, clearly you ain't. And then they bust out laughing. So I could tell they were half lit. And I said, hey, what's up? I'm playing stupid to a certain extent. I'm like, man, what's up with that big telescope up there on the top of that mountain? And then the lady, she like takes her cigarette, takes a puff off the cigarette, looks up and says, yeah, they stole that from us too. I said, really? Add that. And so I'm kind of playing along like, okay, trying to get her to talk. And this guy is sitting next to her. And then she goes on to tell me, bro, this is the part that knocked my junk into my watch pocket, is when she tells me, yeah, that thing they call CERN? I was like, yeah. I'm already thinking, okay, lady, you got the wrong location. That's in Europe. She says, yeah, she said, everybody knows they got one of those superconducting super colliders underneath that thing. And I was like, whoa, I thought this lady was too drunk to know anything about that. I said, hold on, you mean to tell me that thing that they got over there? So then I started demonstrating it too much intelligence. And now it wasn't like an innocuous conversation anymore. I said, you mean you're telling me that underneath that mountain that they have the thing that's over in Europe? You're sure you're not confusing the two? And then she got real nasty with me. She said, no, I'm not stupid. Yeah, this ain't Europe. And then she says, and I'm thinking, man, I better buy this woman some more beer, man. She's telling me everything, bro. So she says, yeah, I think they got one of those superconducting super colliders over there. So I was like, whoa, never heard that before. She said, yeah, you'll find mounds of dirt all around the base of that mountain, that they just show up all the time. She said, everybody knows it. Ain't nobody allowed to talk about it. And then this guy that's sitting next to her elbows her in the gut, dude. I mean, like almost doubles her over. Like, shut up. You don't know this guy. And I was like, it wasn't enough to wear for me to put my hands on him, but it was like, hey, you said too much, shut up. That's basically what he told her. So I realized, okay, that's the end of that conversation. And so I was like, okay, so there's apparently some other stuff going on around. And then I had another person reach out to me and tell me that they thought there was a super collider going on underneath that thing as well. But anyway, the locals all believe. I was able to get in subsequent conversations from the same place because it was the only place that was close where you can get something to eat. And other people, once I started telling the crew, because after a while I had the entire crew like mesmerized by the story of what's going on in Mount Graham. So now they're into it. And so now they're telling me stories because every day we're done doing the work, I go back to the Airbnb I'm at and, I go to bed. These guys go frequent the town. They go to the hot baths. They do all this other stuff. And they're asking the locals about all this lore around there. So they're doing all my research for me. So whenever they would find something, they would immediately come back to me and tell me, hey, this person said this. And so it got to be like a sleuth thing, even though these people were definitely not in it for the same reasons I was. I'm getting some of these stories secondhand, but they said that with all the locals that they had encountered around there, and they were more boots on the ground close to them, they were saying, yeah, man, we found out that there's a lot of strange, they said there's apparitions walking around this place at night. There's all this other crazy stuff going on at night. And I'm like, man, I'm glad I'm going back to the Airbnb. And now they're wanting to go out here and do Joel Thomas ghost hunting stuff. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm like, this ain't going down with me there, bro. I'm not trying to get mixed up with no Nephilim or nothing like that. But these guys were totally into it. But anyway, a long story, hopefully less long, is that all of the locals out there, unless apparently if you can get them topped off at a bar or something, you can get all the stories. But I don't hang out in those places, so I didn't get all those stories. But I did have some other experiences out there for sure.
Yeah, that's wild about the Apache. And you talked about apparitions. Well, one of those apparitions that's seen up there, they had these headless gold miners that are up there on these mountains that people are seeing up there. It's really weird. I just ran across this. So this is a whole other thing that's happening up on Mount Graham too. So there are several different types of things that are happening up there. Real quick though, to get back to why the Apache feel the way that they feel. And it's actually not only anger at the government, but also their own turning on them. So one of the key components for them to take that mountain, the University of Arizona called in this guy called Buck Kitchian, and he was actually the former chief of San Carlos Apache Tribe. So they bring this guy in, and he's going to sign off on them taking the land. And he does this in a press conference in front of the protesters. So they're already mad enough. And here comes a guy who's the former chief. He was actually ousted. And the reason why he was ousted was because he had been convicted in tribal court of embezzlement. And he was actually stripped of his tribal duties. And he was also in federal court because they had also indicted him. So you know what they did? Hey, listen, we'll go ahead and wash all this stuff away. We're going to hook you up. But all you need to do is get up on a podium, speak to your people, but on camera so everybody can see it, and tell everyone why that we need this. So he gets up there in his own tongue, in Native Apache. He starts talking about dedicating this telescope. He starts talking about the church leaders involved. As a matter of fact, the Vatican Observatory director insisted during this display that Mount Graham wasn't even sacred, which Kitchian also conferred with. But what's funny is if you see Kitchian in this whole thing, he's just deadpan faced. You can tell he doesn't want to be there. You can tell he doesn't like anything he's saying. As a matter of fact, he starts talking about the Christian, and I put that in air quotes, Vatican God, and definitely something that he doesn't believe in at all. Oh man, that made the Apaches go insane, but that also helped them be able to take hold of this land because they're like, well, yeah, we got this guy. He was a former chief. And they ended up passing the bill in 1988 to actually take it. But it's very interesting, all of this weird stuff with the Apaches. And you talk about seeing them, meeting them. Well, part of what their lore is on the mountain, there are these sacred mountain spirits. They're called the Ga'an or Gan. You can spell it G-A-H-N or G-A-A-N. And they're these spirits that have met with the people on the mountaintop for a long time. There's actually a story. The original story is there was this boy and he's out with his dog and Apache boy, and he goes into the mountain and he hears all this dancing and all this stuff going on in this cave. And so the dog doesn't want him to go, but he goes anyway, and he meets these beings. And they teach him the Apache crown dance, which the Apache crown dance takes up to 20 years, Billy, for them to learn how to do it. So the people you see doing this Apache crown dance, they've spent 20 years of their life learning how to do this to call these entities down. So they've got their own story about Usin, the creator, and Usin, the creator, is the one that creates the Ga'an, and it's a convoluted story, like a lot of different creation stories are, but he creates the universe and very interesting stuff. There's a giant tarantula involved that increases the Earth size, all kind of different interesting, weird stuff. But at the core root of it is there are these entity, which remind me a lot of when I did the Native American Stargates episode. I talked about the Kachina, and the Kachina are very similar to these Ga'an, which the Ga'an are more associated with the Apaches, where the Kachina are more associated with the Hopi and some of the other tribes. But they all operate very similarly in that they are connected to a creator God, whatever you want to call it, and they are here to guide mankind and give them technologies, whatever you think those technologies are, right? Whether it's astrology, whether it's how to build things or how to influence the tribes or communities that they're influencing, it's the same thing. So this has been a part of Apache mythology and Apache history for hundreds of years. And it's directly correlated to this specific mountain. And you have to ask, well, what is it about the Vatican and these universities that come along and say that, oh, there's nothing sacred about it? Well, why are all these quote unquote sacred organizations wanting a piece of it? The Jesuits, the Catholics, we could talk about the monastery at the bottom of the mountain. All of these religious institutions want a piece of this mountain. And that was the part that really fascinated me, and the butting of the heads with the Apache. But when you brought up the Apache, it made me think about how that it was actually turned over to the government, and it was an Apache himself that helped to give this land to the government.
Bro, there's so many weird spots in this whole thing and why that mountain. And Tom Horn and Chris Putnam in their book do a pretty good job of explaining. They don't give you the answers why. They just tell you weird things like Father Guy Cosmonago, or Consul Magno, I think his name is, Chief Vatican Observatory. I mean, this guy's made some really odd statements that are chronicled in the book, where he's saying, hey, I would baptize an alien, and hey, we're expecting. And Tom Horn had the emails to prove it, saying, hey, when these guys come back, because on top of that mountain, they're recalling conversations among the Vatican astronomers up there saying, look, there are days we got to wait for the ships up there to get out of the way before we can see past them. And they're like openly having these conversations in front of Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. And they're thinking, okay, there is more to this mountain. There is something definitely going on. Now, is there a Hadron Collider down below? Who knows? It wouldn't shock me none. I mean, they're probably all over. I mean, you already got this crazy sacred mountain. Maybe they're doing other things that they think may supercharge it. Maybe working in tandem with the uh, with the binocular telescope that's on top of it, which, by the way, this thing is so exclusive that even NASA has to sign up for time to use in it. It's better than anything that we have, and it's owned by the Vatican. So why this spot? It's definitely spiritually charged in some very, very strange ways. And if you know anything about a lot of what's going on with the Vatican, with a lot of the ancient sites out there where they would find, let's say, giant bones or some other things that aren't supposed to be there in history, what happens? We can chronicle this all the way back to the 1500s. Whenever they found anything of note, what has the Vatican always done throughout antiquity? They will basically plop down a church right on top of it and do excavations underneath it. It's happened forever and ever and ever. In fact, if you look at ever since the discovery of America or the Americas, that's exactly what they've done forever and a day. So I wonder if this place is just the latest one of the more latest examples of something. I think there's more than what meets the eye. I mean, there clearly is. There's so much going on there. And with some of the interactions that I had out there, particularly, I don't know if you'd like me to go into that, but it was so weird that it made me call you up from out in Arizona, bro. That's how crazy it was. I don't know if you want me to get into that right now, but there was they actually had like a Vatican day. I couldn't go to the top of the mountain, but at the base of it, across from the high school, from Safford High School, is a place called the Discovery Park. And it's kind of cool, man. It's really, really cool. And at night, I just happened to be there at the right time. I was looking at it online and it says, hey, we're having a thing that's open to the public where everybody's going to bring their telescopes out. And guess what? We got a telescope on the site out there that was revolutionary at its time. We'll let you look at it and see the whole thing. So I was like, okay. Told everybody on the Earthship build, hey, this is where I'm going tonight if y'all want to go. And at first they were like, I don't know. And I said, hey, man, there's free food. And they're like, all right, we'll be there. So all these hippies, who had, I mean, bro, it was something else to see, man. You never seen so many cookies get eaten, bro. These hippies were wiping them out. But anyway, we go there. Well, do you want me to get into that right quick, or
Let's touch on the Putnam and Horn incident. I wanted to touch on that, and then you brought up Guy Consolmagno, and I want to talk about some of the stuff he was saying leading up to it, because I think it's going to give a lot of context to what happened when you went there and why what happened to you went on, because you said some very triggering things that keyed off some individuals while you were there. And I think it would be important for people to kind of know what might have been going through their head and the knowledge that you knew going into it. So one of the things about you brought it up briefly, was when Tom Horn and Chris Putnam were brought up to the top of the mountain, and they went into the different areas. They went into the area where the LBT's at. They went to the SMT where the sub-millimeter telescope's at, and they also went to the VATT as well. And they did meet one of the Jesuit fathers there. They walked them through. But the interesting part was when they were walking through the large binocular telescope, and the systems engineer that was on duty that day, they said that he was showing them the 7 different levels of the machine, and he kept pointing to the Lucifer device, and they said very lovingly, he called it Lucy, very lovingly called it Lucifer. The other weird part was when they were in the room with all these engineers, they were talking freely and casually about how many UFOs they would capture on the screen throughout just a day. And they were blown away at the fact that the engineer that was walking them through didn't blink an eye, actually joined in with them talking about UFOs. And it was a big deal that they were so openly talking about UFOs like it was just the back of their hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say as well that you brought up to me at one point that one of the things that they had discovered or I know that they were looking for, and I'm going to talk about in a minute, that was actually on the actual website originally, on the Vatican website. But they are also looking for this 10th planet, this Planet X, this Nibiru that is supposedly past Pluto, further out. And from my knowledge is that they have seen through this Lucifer telescope what seems to be some sort of dark, massive object that's beyond our galaxy.
Yeah, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam in their book, and also in subsequent videos that they did, they're both passed on right now. In fact, Chris Putnam was the first to go, and then Tom Horn later on. In fact, not long ago. Big fan of their books and their work. I mean, just excellent scholarly work. But anyway, yeah, they're talking about how that they spoke so openly and flippant about everything that happened there, but all of a sudden. Now, remember, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, when they predicted that the Pope in their first book together, Petrus Romanus, nobody for the most part knew who either one of these guys were until they wrote the book Petrus Romanus, and they predicted with total precision. In fact, down to the very month that when the previous Pope would step down. It had not happened in 600 years. And everybody just kind of dismissed it until it happened. And they said, well, your timing was off. Well, then when you go read the book, you find out that they actually did pick it down to the month based on what they called the St. Malachi prophecy. And this is through Catholic lore. Anyway, these guys have gained notoriety. I mean, they would become household names among certain circles, whether it's in the, the coast to coast AM kind of people, to you name it, to people that, are casual scholars like ourselves. And all of a sudden, these guys have incredible notoriety. And now, I think they had actually took a tour of this before Petrus Romanus actually came out, which is the only reason these guys were able to get under the radar, because had they read Petrus Romanus, they would have never, ever let them step foot on this place. So they had gotten all the footage up for this before Petrus Romanus, I think, even hit the streets. So these guys get up here and they turn the whole world on its head when they came up with Petrus Romanus. And in fact, to a certain extent, they were afraid for their lives. Now, all of a sudden, when they come up with Exo Vaticana, they're like, these guys had some serious street cred all of a sudden. And now people are really, really paying attention, me being one of them. And of course, I'm, reading everything I can get my hands on about this topic. But yeah, they're talking whether it's Nibiru, whether it's the Blue Kachina, whatever some people call it. These guys, and it goes all the way back to that guy, Father Malachi Martin. He was the first to talk about what was happening on Mount Graham. And he did it back when Art Bell was doing Coast to Coast AM. And he had talked about, Malachi Martin had dropped so many doggone tactical nukes of information out there. It's likely what got him killed. And I think he was killed, in fact. But anyway, he talked briefly on Coast to Coast about what was happening up there and how the whole purpose of spending all of these billions and billions to do all the political wrangling they had to do and to put this thing up there was for one solitary thing. And it was to look at this object, to look at this one singular object that is basically coming in from wherever, whoever knows where. And they knew this since, I don't know, maybe the 80s or 70s, they knew. So you think about this, Joel. They did all of this. If Putnam and Horn are correct, and I believe they probably are, and Father Malachi Martin, that they did this for the sole purpose of keeping track of whatever this object was coming in. But like you said, Horn and Putnam they're describing that these guys are just having these casual conversations about entire armadas out there that are blocking their ability to see anything. And they got to wait for days just for these guys to move out of the way. And they were just saying it manually. Now, I had wondered, okay, was this a limited hangout? Was this, you're always thinking, am I being duped here? What's going on? I'd always wondered that too, or maybe these guys were set up. I don't know. At that time, I don't think Petrus Romanus had come out, so maybe they just thought they were regular tourists, but it would seem odd for them to have such a consequential conversation among it, that these guys just happen to be there. So I've always questioned that part of it. But at the end of the day, Man, I mean, what other reason would they have to have this spiritually charged mountain? Why that mountain? There's only 7 holy mountains among native people on the planet, and this is one of them. And they had to have it. They did all this crazy legal wrangling, and there's a whole lot of weird things going on around there. Yeah, these guys, when Tom Horn and Putnam came out with that book, it had turned, and now all of a sudden the emails, and good thing Tom Horn had kept them, that he got from Father Guy Cosolmagno. I can't remember his name exactly, but it goes something like that. He was a chief Vatican observer. Anyway, he had denied having said any of this to Tom Horn, but Tom Horn had all the emails proving, yeah, you know what? When these guys come here, we might have to do away with the Bible because they might have a better spiritual understanding. And this was like, what? Say what? And this is right there in black and white. The guy actually said it, that we might have to, I wouldn't have any problem baptizing an alien. They don't have man's fallen spirit and all these other things that before he knew the consequences of his conduct, he wrote all these things down, and Tom Horn had it right there in black and white. So yes, it's out there and they know something's going on. The full degree of which, I don't know. Is this one giant con? I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that they would go through so much effort, so much. I mean, the government has done it before with things like the Glomar Explorer, but it would be shocking to me that they would put a giant binocular telescope that sees in the infrared range. No other thing does that on this planet. And why they would have to have it right there, I mean, there seems like a whole lot of smoke to that fire. And based on the experiences that I had later, made me think that maybe there's some things going on there they don't want us to know about.
No, I completely agree with you. And I want to say something real quick about the final pope, that what they predicted didn't pan out. But when you're looking at the prophecy, though, the prophecy's not super clear either. So I'm actually doing some work on myself on this. I'm going to come out with, I don't know, a 2-part episode or something on this, because I do think that the prophecy's real. And I think that maybe there were some components there that either were moved around or were obviously translated a little differently, because think about it. You come out with this book and then you're nailing things down to the key, they're just going to switch it up. I mean, they do this all the time. So I think there's something to it. And I don't think that they were off with their predictions as a whole, but I do think there was a swerve at some point. But I do think that there are some things to look at when it comes to the prophecy, because I was reading some stuff recently saying that even some of the fathers and priests that had known about the prophecy said the end part of it was a little unclear. So in saying that, then the prophecy could still be intact, albeit maybe there was a representation of it in the early part that was released, obviously with Horn and Putnam, that maybe either they changed the game or the game wasn't quite what they thought it was initially. But I just wanted to throw that out there because, like you said, it was debunked per the book. But I think the prophecy has always been around. It's been around forever. So it's interesting. I think that the prophecy itself is interesting enough to do some sort of work on it. But to get to what you mentioned about Guy Consolmagno, and you talked about those emails and those PDF files. And for people that don't know who he is, he's a Jesuit priest, and he was an American research astronomer, physicist, and he was director at the Vatican Observatory when he had moved into the astronomy part of becoming a Jesuit. Because in 1989, he entered the Society of Jesus, and this was after he had went through the University of Detroit Jesuit High School. He was trained all the way from a child to move into this particular position. So to your point, that the stuff that he said verbatim to Tom Horn, he would bring up things like, we're going to look to the aliens to be the saviors of humankind, which is really weird. He also references the Nephilim And when referencing the Nephilim, he starts talking about non-human intelligence and how that the Nephilim could also be tied into that. He uses a verse out of John 10:16, which Jesus says, "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." So then Consolmagno writes, perhaps it's not so far-fetched to see the second person of the Trinity, the Word who was present in the beginning, coming to lay down his life and take it up again, not only as the Son of Man, but also as a child of other races. So that's when Tom Horn starts speculating, well, wait a minute. You seem to be talking about Jesus like he's a star child, like he is of alien descent, that he is a Nephilim, which Consolmagno was alluding to, which I thought that was also mind-blowing as well. And then you got guys like Dr. Christopher Corbally, and he was the vice director for the Vatican Observatory Research Group on Mount Graham until 2012. And he said he believes our image of God will have to change if disclosure of alien life is soon revealed. And he suggested that essentially aliens will have a different code of ethic than us, and they would be pure and holy because they wouldn't have fallen. How he would know that, I don't know.
Exactly.
But he suggested that they would be able to guide us into true Christianity, the true faith of Christianity, which is also mind blowing that this is all coming out of the Vatican. And this was all documented by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. And these were all in emails and PDF files that were sent to them through email verbatim. As a matter of fact, Consolmagno started talking about the Jesus seed. And his idea was that all these planets have a Jesus. And the Jesus is implemented into their biological structure, and then he saves their planet, but every planet's saved in a different way. Everybody else has got a different code of ethics. It's not the same code of ethics as us. I find it fascinating because, on the one hand, I want to say that we don't know anything outside of where we live and what God's given us. And on the one hand, I could say that I don't know what else God's created. I don't know what else he's done. But at the same sense, I do believe that what he's taught us and what he's given us would hold true through the fabric of space and time. So what they're doing, in my opinion, Billy, is that they're setting the tone for what these quote unquote aliens are going to be. And we're basically going to rewrite religion as a whole when these beings show up. And why is this connected to Mount Graham? Why are they on Mount Graham? Why is it so important to find out this particular knowledge on Mount Graham? You couldn't go any place in the world and do it, but you got to go to Mount Graham to figure out this part of it. And listen, we've only named just a few of the people working for the Vatican that have said this stuff. It's from the top down. The Pope has said similar things.
Mhm.
So it's not that they're not talking about it. They've been doing this for the past 20 plus years.
No, bro, that's what I'm saying. When you add everything up, when you take everything in its totality and you just kind of, piece it here, take this piece there, I'm not a coincidence theorist. There are way too many coincidences for this to make sense. Why would you have to have this spiritually charged mountain right there in that part of Arizona when there's any number of others you could have picked that were, and in fact, I learned when I was at that Discovery Park for their little event that there were better suited mountains. And then when I tried to get down to brass tacks, I asked too many questions. That's the problem. And I come in there a little bit disarming at first. And then my problem is I'd be a poor detective, because honestly, once I start hearing something that really, really makes sense to me, all of a sudden I start asking questions that I'm supposed to be ignorant about. And then all of a sudden I kind of get myself in trouble. And that's exactly what unfolded there. But yeah, they were telling me that there are any number of other mountains out there, because the higher you go, the less atmospheric disturbance you're going to have. So even if they could gain another 30 feet, when you're dealing with let's say you got one mountain that's 10,000 feet, and one mountain that's 10,030 feet, one mountain that's 10,032. You're going to pick that extra 2 feet because it can mean all the difference in the world with kind of instrumentation that they're working with. So I was like, so why this one? Why this one? Because it's not like Safford, Arizona is like some metropolis, man. They got a Walmart and they got a few this and that, but by and large, it's not a very big town. And you're pretty well self-contained up there, as I understand it. So it's not as if you need all these creature comforts, and you got the deepest pockets in the world. So it's not like you're worried about anything else. So why that mountain? Why that time? Why those people? Why? I mean, there are just way too many things that add up here that make me think, okay, either we are in one giant. And then Tom Horn, to be honest with you, I mean, he kind of alluded to the fact that maybe this is one giant shell game. And I don't know whether he said it in the book or whether it was in subsequent interviews, but he made it clear that, maybe there's no way they spent this kind of money for a psyop, but he couldn't dismiss it either. So,
Right.
At the end of the day, you got to sit here and wonder, it seems to me that we're being set up for the next thing that's coming. In fact, that's exactly what the guy said on Coast to Coast AM, Father, whose name escapes me right now, Malachi Martin. He said, they know exactly what is going on. In fact, as I recall on that episode on Coast to Coast, when he was on there talking about it, he was lamenting the fact of the strong arm tactics that the Vatican was pulling to screw over these Apache that were like, okay, man, we're down to our last inch of skin. You done stole everything else from us, man. You're going to take our mountain too? And that's exactly what they did. And, Malachi Martin was lamenting the fact that they would pull that rabbit out of the hat too, when there's any number of other mountains that are in stone's throws. I mean, because when you're there, all you see are other mountaintops. And as you look around there, like I said, it's a weird kind of beauty around there, but this one just doesn't, it's kind of by itself. You have a whole mountain range, just like where I live right now in Western North Carolina. You see mountain range, but they all seem to be connected through ridge lines, This one isn't set up that way. It's like kind of by itself. And it's not so much into the mountain range as all the other mountains. It's like it stands alone almost, as if it just kind of has its own whatever, like here I am. And other ones they said would have been tactically easier to get to. So many things just don't add up. And then, like I said, if you want to find out how to end a party real quick, bring me to it when there's some Vatican priests around there, and you're going to see how quickly they shut things down.
Well, let's get into that. Let's get into that part of it, Billy. Let's hear the story of when you went to Mount Graham on a tour and what happened there, because we haven't talked about this on air, and I'm very interested to hear what other people are going to think about this, because I was blown away. You called me and you said, hey, man, I need to talk to you on the phone. I think you were still out in Arizona when you called me, there. Right?
Yeah. I called you 2 days after it happened.
So you called me and I said, yeah, let's hear it. And man, I was mind blown, whole cat peeled back after I heard this one. And I definitely want you to tell the story. I think it's going to be super interesting for everyone to hear. But yeah, the floor is yours, man, on this one, because it's wild.
Yeah. So as I'm working out here in this Earthship crew, and it was during the week. It was, I was like, man, it's going to be night when we're out there. Of course, because I flew out there, I'm unarmed. I don't have any weapons on me outside of my pocket knife, So I was a little bit dubious, like, okay, I'm a grown man, but man, I probably ought to bring some backup, even though they're a bunch of hippies. So they have this place called Discovery Park. So you can't actually take the tour up to Mount Graham, but when you do it from Discovery Park. You buy your tickets there because they put you on a bus and they'll drive you up to Mount Graham. But since I was there in the winter, they say it's unpassable, which I find difficult to believe. But anyway, and especially the locals, they're telling me, nah, they just don't want you up there. So I'm like, okay. So I realized, I go online and I said, well, what's this Discovery? I'm looking to see if they have any local museums. And it is, honestly, for as small as it is, a pretty impressive museum that they have at this Discovery Center right across the street from the high school of Safford, Arizona. So I get over there, and the way they build this thing is like, hey, we're going to have telescope night. You come out here, we'll let you look through some of these old telescopes and the whole 9 yards, man. We're going to have like world-class experts and people from the actual observatory at Mount Graham. You mentioned one of them's name a moment ago. He was there. So I show up there. I am the first one, and it's kind of disquieting because I show up early. When I say early, I'm like maybe 30 minutes early, but I'm the only one there. Nobody else is there. And I'm thinking, man, did I get the wrong signal? Because this thing was supposed to go from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And I'm there at like 5:30 or somewhere around. I'm sitting there eating my burrito, waiting. Nobody shows up. And then about maybe 6:15, and I'm about ready to go, people start showing up. I see them holding bags over their shoulder. There's men, there's women, there's like maybe 15 different people, and they all have telescope equipment. Some of it big, some of it small. And I'm realizing these are all like telescope enthusiasts. So I'm like, okay, well, let me go up to this building and see what's up. And then I realized at that point that they have a museum on the inside. So I'm like, okay, let's go in here and see what's up. I go through, and being a brown person, um, I guess I'm not the usual, there ain't a whole lot of black folks, man, they're in the telescope and stuff, I guess. I don't know. But man, you'd have thought Michael Jackson walked in that place, bro. Soon as I walk in there, they're like, hi, how are you? I'm like, oh, snap. And I'm like,
You got
okay,
the
maybe
extra treatment.
yeah, bro. I'm like, would you like some cookies? I'm like, absolutely. Let's eat these cookies. They don't even know who I am. I'm like, and so I'm messing around with these folks, and I said, hey, yeah, I heard y'all are having a Black Panther meeting here today. I'm just here to, what's up with that? And so they're like, no, we have a that. They didn't even get the joke, man. I'm like, yeah, I heard there was a Black Panther meeting going on here, man. What's up with that? And they're like, no, but we have our we're going to be looking through telescopes. We're going to have a slide presentation. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Now I'm sitting here wondering, I'm like, okay, cool, man. Let me eat some of these cookies and see what's up. So it was about that time. It was about maybe, it started at 6, and they were going to wait for it to get dark before they actually brought us out to go look at the telescopes. But meanwhile, they had people that were from the actual observatory. One of them, you mentioned his name a moment ago. I can't think of it right now, but he used to be the person that ran that entire place up there, but now he's retired. And he just does volunteer stuff, from here and there. And he comes out to these monthly things. And here I am, lucky guy, just happened to be there. So I'm going through they're going through their museum, and a lot of it is history that I think is BS. But anyway, I'm going through it, and I'm looking at it. And then the other people from the Earthship Academy show up, and I'm like, I kind of take a sigh of relief because I'm like, okay, at least I know these people. And then they're like, are they with you? Nobody, we don't ever have this many people. I say, yeah, I know these folks. We're all working down at the Earthship, blah, 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 blah. I go in there and show these hippies the cookies. And now we got to sit through this presentation, man. They're here for the cookies, bro. They're all high as all get out anyway. They all got the munchies. All they wanted the cookies. They don't even want to see anything about anything. So we get in there and watch this whack video that they have. And then it's all a bunch of boomers. And then, of course, I'm the oldest one there. And the rest of them are just young kids in their 20s, I suppose. Anyway, we sit through this movie and they say, okay, yeah, any questions? And then somebody asks a question, anyway, they say, okay, let's go outside. We're going to start looking at the telescopes. I'm like, cool. So this museum is basically abandoned. We were inside this little tiny auditorium that they had inside of it. So they take us out and we start looking through the telescopes. And this is cool for me because I've never looked at telescopes that were this powerful before. So I go over to this one guy, look through his telescope. He's showing me one thing. I don't even recall what it was. Go to another guy. They got these little stations and you go all the way around. And when you meet enthusiasts like this, man, they're so passionate about what they do that they will talk to you about anything. And so when I thought I found somebody that might be pliable, I just casually say to him, have you ever been to that observatory on top of the mountain up there? And it was actually a middle-aged lady. And she said, yeah, I've been up there quite a few times. I'm like, hey, I said, I read this book a while ago and I'm playing stupid. It was by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. I didn't even get the words out of my mouth. She said, hey, wait right here. Okay. And I'm like, okay. So I'm just sitting here waiting. I think maybe 5 minutes went by. She comes walking back with the curator of the museum. And the only reason I knew he was the curator is because, he was the one conducting this presentation that we were just watching a moments ago. And he says, yeah, you were asking about Mount Graham. I said, okay, I guess you're the one to talk to. Yeah, I was, and I'm playing stupid. And I'm like, hey, I was wondering, is there any truth to this book written by Tom Horn and Chris Putnam? I think it's called Exo Vaticana. Of course, I knew everything about this book. And knowing that I was going there, I got into it all over again, but I'm playing dumb. And he says, well, come with me. So we go back. This time it's completely dark out there. We're dark in the desert, bro. And I'm unarmed. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I guess if it gets too stupid, I'll put this guy through a 5-minute flurry of fists. So we go back in this museum and I'm like, this is odd. I'm like, everything's going on out here. I'm like, okay, so what's up? He says, I just want to tell you about that Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. He says, you know what? They went on a regular tour with us up here. And the next thing I know, they put out a book full of lies. And I said, oh, is that right? So I start asking him about particulars. And the more I can see this guy's body language, I can tell he's getting more and more and more upset. And as he's walking, he's taking me further into this museum, back to a place in that museum that I'd never seen before. And it's a very small museum. It doesn't take, if you were to just walk straight through, it might take you a minute.
Right.
But he takes me to this part in the very back corner that is facing a door. It has a door at the very back corner. And I'm like, hold up. I got my back to this door and this guy's the only way out. And then I'm thinking, okay. And I'm like, how did I get myself in this position? And I'm thinking, okay, this just got a little bit creepy. And this guy, the more he's talking, the more upset he's getting. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to slide him in the jaw and I'm going to roll up out of here, man, because I ain't about to go down. I've seen too many movies, man. And I'm thinking, okay, so I kind of position my back to where it's not facing that door, but I'm like, okay, man, there's enough of them, bro. There ain't nothing I'm going to do. And the other group has the people in my group don't even know that I'm here. They don't even know I went back in this museum. So I kind of put my back up against the glass. So the door is kind of to my left and he's to my right. And then he keeps going. And then there's a point where I'm not even listening to what he's saying. I'm just looking for a way to get out of here because I'm thinking, man, this makes no sense to me. So I'm kind of like with my back towards it, I'm kind of walking towards the entrance, to get back out of this place. Mm-hmm. And he's like kind of mirroring me as I'm going along. And the whole time, and then there was a point when we got close to the door where I'm realizing, okay, I got a point of egress. Okay, it's time to be cool again. So I said, you know what? Hey, man, thank you so much for your time. When I realized everything was cool, I said, you know what? Thank you so much for your time. And I said, I'm just going to go out here and look at these what do you call them? The telescopes again. Now, at this point, the guy who was the initial director of everything going on the top of Mount Graham, he was a guy at that time. I don't know if he was a former priest or whatever, but he wasn't in priestly robes or anything like that. In fact, the priest that they told us was on the way, they said he was about 10 minutes out. Never even showed up at that point. And I swear, bro, it was only as soon as I walked out of that building, the same guy who was the chief director on top of that observatory, now all of a sudden I'm trying to talk to him and he won't even look me in the eye. He won't talk to me. He won't say anything. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? I'm still trying to piece it all together at this point. And then we hear somebody say in the back, okay, it's all over. It's all over. I'm like, what? And I'm like, hey, I thought this thing goes till 9. It's all over. I said, but hey, in your brochure online, it says this thing goes from 6 to 9. It's only like, 7 o'clock. And the weather's nice. It's over. It's over. It is over. And then they kind of put it like that. And so I'm trying to talk to this guy. And at this point, I'm going to try to get some video for YouTube or whatever.
Right.
And bro, these people would not have any, you would have thought I was a leper. All I did was bring up the name of Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. And I did it in a very, I would say disarming kind of way. I wasn't confrontational, none of that. I just kind of did it in a way to where I was playing stupid, but just by bringing up their name and talking about what they said in that book, got that whole thing shut down right there on the spot. So it was like I was at that convent all over again. I'm like, okay, I ran my mouth and then bam, it's like they said, hey, shut the whole thing down. So by this time, there were still people showing up to this event, but they had shut the whole thing down. And I'm trying to get up here and talk to this guy because strangely enough, bro, when I first showed up, when I told you I showed up and I said, hey, I'm showing up to a Black Panthers meeting, the guy that was in the group that I was talking to, I didn't even know that he was the chief Vatican dude up on that mountain when I first spoke to him. I had a very pleasant conversation with him prior to that. And now all of a sudden, his whole demeanor, everything about this guy changed. And so it's one of those things, man, that when you look back at it and you think, okay, so later on that day, I'm like, okay, man, let me get in this vehicle and get on out here, see if I can't decompress. It was bothering me over and over and over. And I was like, man, who might know something about this? That's when I texted you. I said, hey, man, you got time to talk? I'm out here working on an earth ship, bro. And I'm like, I got to get to I don't know what just happened up in here. But I also got that creepy, I guess I should definitely point this part out. The part that was most disturbing to me, and I don't know that I've ever felt this feeling all that much in my life, is that when I was in that museum, there was a feeling of foreboding that I don't know how to put my hands on, that I don't know how to really quite describe. If need be, I would have fought my way out of that place. I'd have done whatever I had. But look, with the benefit of hindsight, I was thinking, dude, I should not feel this. The guy was considerably smaller than me. And I'm like, he didn't feel at all. I mean, in the regular world, I would not have been, even if there were a couple of them there. I mean, I'm like, these are like high school band nerds, man. I could probably, why did I get this sense of foreboding? I don't know that I was getting an unction from anything supernatural. I don't know what it was, but something was telling me get out of that place. And apparently, I got out of there enough. I mean, it was odd. It was weird. And bro, that's when I had to get on the horn with you, man, saying, hey, what do you know about this? And then, by the way, the lady I was telling you about in the bar, that had happened like 2 days, I think, after I spoke to you. So it was, yeah. I mean, and there were some other things that went on around there too, as far as people. And I was getting all this secondhand because, like I said, I'm not a person that goes to bars and hangs out and stuff like that, but I was hearing it from the other people. Once they heard about this lore up there, they were asking all the locals, even though it was turning them into pariah to a certain extent, because it's known among the natives that, man, you don't talk about this stuff to anybody that's not one of us.
Right.
And now, if you can get them liquored up, yeah, they would talk to you about anything. And apparently they were talking about a great many other things as well, as far as some of these apparitions that were kind of floating around there at night. So, yeah, bro, that's my Mount Graham story. And I got with you about it. Next thing I know, we were talking about it later on my show.
One of the things, and I want to say we talked about on your show, but I know we talked about it on the phone for sure, was when you were getting let out and you were being taken away from everyone else, isolated. It makes me wonder what they were isolating you for. You were able to get back into a place where you were able to get essentially away, but you said the guy was mirroring you. And you also said a key thing that we haven't talked about yet. And it just made me think, what supernaturally was around in that vicinity that he was leading you to? Because it's like you said, from a physical standpoint, you weren't worried about him, but you obviously had some sort of feeling that something wasn't right. And if you continue down this path with this guy, that something wouldn't end up well. So I know initially we thought, well, maybe he was leading you to some other people that might have been able to handle you with weapons or whatever else. But here's the other thought. What if it wasn't? What if he was leading you to something that was far stranger in this entire story? And what if you would have ran up against something that might not have ended well? And it just makes me think that there's way more going on there than meets the eye. And it seems like that everyone in that area knows something, but they're not telling anybody anything about what's really going on. And they all seem to have connections with entities, every single group, but in a different way. in a different format. So I'm starting to really think about the supernatural end of it too. What might have been at the end of that walk where he was leading you might not have been people.
Well, bro, I'll tell you what it wasn't going to be. It wasn't going to be none of this go up in the ship, give up the booty BS. Because I've heard too many stories about that, bro. I didn't know how. I just know that this guy, his countenance, there was something even in his countenance that seemed off. And the bizarre thing about it is that there was no reason for us to walk in this part of the museum. If he wanted to have this conversation, he could have very well had it down this main corridor that was right there. We didn't have to go into the museum, but he made it a point to get me in here. And we're the only two in this entire museum. And it was back in this, and I'm like, whoa, dude, okay, this ain't cool, man. You got your back to this dude. And he's almost infringing upon my space. In America, we have, generally an arm's distance away is what you expect to speak somebody at. He was one of those people that has that odd thing of speaking to you at a closer distance than most people would be comfortable with. So that was a little bit off-putting, but he didn't start to infringe upon my space until we were in that part of the museum. And then when I noticed, hold up, dude, there's a door behind me and he's in front of me. And I'm like, and I know I did it rather abruptly. I pulled myself to where my back was, where the door was to my left and he was to my right. And then as I'm talking, I'm not taking my eyes off of him, thinking, okay, I'm just going to get out in this main corridor. And that's when it was like, I don't even know how they even communicated with each other that quickly, to be honest with you, where it literally went for me I didn't even get Tom Putnam and Chris Horn. I got about that far. She said, hey, wait right here. It was that far, bro. And I'm like, you can't tell me I'm the first person to bring these guys up, but I'm like, am I? And then you bring me over here, you get me back in this museum, you intentionally take me back here and get me situated to where my back, I don't know what was about to go down. I don't know what. And the thing is, I wasn't close enough or tight enough with the other people in that Earthship group where they probably would not have even noticed that I was missing. They might have thought, hey, I just ate my cookies and rolled up out of there. That's what they might have thought. So I was like, no, okay, something's telling me to get up out of here, man. And then all of a sudden, just like that, they shut it down. This thing was supposed to go for 3 hours. They shut it down. The second I walked back in that corridor and I said, hey, thank you for your time. All of a sudden, hey, it's all over. And I'm like, hey, this thing goes till 9. No, it's all over. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, everybody's packed up and it's done. I'm like, wow. You mean to tell me they will? I don't know. There seemed to be more going on there. And I ain't gonna lie, bro. I made sure I walked with all even those stinky Earthship people, man, that don't take a shower every day. Bro, I even let them ride with me, man. I was like, hey, I know y'all piled up in that station wagon, bro, but hey, I'll give y'all a ride back. Even jump up front if you like, man. So I brought them back, and there was one guy that I was able to talk to about this. I don't know that I should give his name here, but anyway, he was one of the guys that honestly saw this stuff, and he got a creepy feeling about what was going on out there. And he was one of the few people that would actually ask critical questions about, the things that we're officially told. But even he thought, man, that was weird. He says, we show up there, we just got the place and they just shut it all down. Why? And I told him what happened. He said, oh, is that where you went? He said, we were looking for you out there. I was like, well, yeah, man. And I told him what had happened. And then after that, I was like, man, I got to get this off my shoulders. So obviously I told my wife, and then I was like, man, dude, you're the only one I know that might understand what just happened here and what kind of creepy crap it just went on. So that was it, man. And I don't know if I'm on the list right now, but hey, man, I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I would love to go back out. Apparently summer, anytime but winter is going to be a good time to go out there. I would like to get a close-up personal look at this thing.
Right.
But these guys definitely didn't have wonderful things to say about Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. And then in fact, when I started kind of challenging some of the things he was telling me, I was like, man, I'm pretty well studied on this book. I'm like, hold on, what do you mean these guys were lying about it? I'm like, they got the emails from Father Cosmo. And then when I pulled out his name, I was like, okay, he knows the guy's name. You could see the more I would challenge him, the more he would get upset with what was there. And honestly, if you look at the whole thesis of the book, they're not even coming down on them for anything. They're not even, yeah, they're highly critical of the fact of how they treated the Apache. But outside of that, it's really not a harsh indictment on these people for what they've done. It's just saying, hey, this is what they told us. And
Right.
apparently they didn't want it out. But I think that book got a little more hay than they expected. And so anyway, Joel, if you ever find yourself out there, don't even mention those guys until you're off the tour bus.
Yeah, if I go out there, I'll try to be a little more covert. But yeah, I'm so glad that you came on the show, Billy, to tell this story. I was looking forward for other people to hear this. I know we talked about it on your show, and this was a while back. And I wanted to get you on this show because I brought up Mount Graham on the Stargate episode. And I was like, you know what? Let me go a little deeper with Mount Graham. And I was like, there's no way I can do this without having Billy come on and tell his stories. And he told me a brand new one I hadn't heard today either about the
Monastery, yeah. I didn't,
monastery.
none of this, all of this happened after I'd spoken to you. I mean, going to the monastery was like the last few days I was there. And there was some other weird stuff that went on at that monastery. I mean, there's definitely some weird stuff. And and by the way, I did ask them about that mountain and what was going on up there, bro. And they were mum's the word. It was absolutely, they said, well, we don't exactly get along with the Catholics, and that's who's running that thing up there. And I'm like, oh, well, man, I see a whole lot of Catholic motifs around here. I mean, I didn't say this, but I was asking them about it. But bro, there was a whole lot of things about that place that just doesn't make sense, man. Everything from the walls around there, its isolation, and there's just a whole lot of question marks. I would love to go back. I really would. I would love to go back and take another tour of that place now that I have different eyes and better understanding of, things that are going on.
Right.
And honestly, I'd love to go hit that Mount Graham again. I'll let you handle all the night stuff, bro. But if y'all need another cameraman out there, bro, I'm your man for the daytime filming.
For the daytime filming, I feel you on that, Billy. Man, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Billy. If you can, tell everybody where to find you, and especially people that are interested in permaculture too, where they can find you, and if they need to reach out to you for something like that as well.
Yeah, well, when I'm not in a 2-week suspension as I am right now on YouTube, because we had a guest actually have the audacity to bring up the benefits of eating seeds. So they gave me a 2-week timeout claiming that certain seeds can chelate heavy metals out of you. So when I'm not in timeout, you can catch us at Permapastures Farm. And my son, who was on here at the beginning and of course couldn't make it, you can catch him out at the Permaculture Consultant on YouTube. And also we have a podcast that we do together called the Permaculture P.I.M.P.cast. P.I.M.P. is an acronym. It stands for Permaculture is My Passion. And we've been talking about all things, and lately, all things farming and everything. Yeah, we're all about teaching you self-sufficiency, but honestly, we're really starting to get more and more into the circadian health space, trying to get people to find some seriously natural cures that all are derived from what the good Lord put on this earth. So, yeah, you can find us there, or Billy at permapasturesfarm.com. I even have an X account now. Go to @permapastures. That's an adventure. So, yeah, look forward to hearing more. I mean, Joel, you're doing fantastic work, bro. I'm lucky to know you. It'd be good to meet you in person one of these days. Maybe I'll head up to one of these festivals you guys go to from time to time. I can go. Actually, there's a Bigfoot festival this weekend down in North Carolina, so I'm going to go out there. I don't suppose you're going to be there, but maybe I'll run into some of your cohorts out there, man. It's always a joy to hang out with you, my brother.
Absolutely, Billy. And on the way out, just so we can end this on a weird note, I want to read a little segment from Father Funes, who also Tom Horn talked about as well. And one of the things that he says at the very end of this little segment, he says, if other intelligent beings exist, it is not said that they would have need of redemption. They could remain in full friendship with their creator. By full friendship, he means that they're closer to God than we fallen humans are. And that, as a consequence, they may come here to evangelize us. So I want people to really let that seep in. This is what the Vatican's talking about. These beings coming to evangelize us. These aliens are coming to evangelize us. We don't need God. They're coming to show us who God really is. Guys, on the way out, check out my new song, Imposter. And you know what it is, guys. Go outside, touch grass, and get your tail out the hole.
I'm in a fun house, locked in a boxcar with all of these clowns. Don't feel like I belong, but maybe I do. Cause when I look in the puddle, maybe I'm just a ruse. Or maybe I'm just confused. Ooh, I'm a gorilla in the jungle, but my mind's got me trapped in the zoo. Ooh, what you see is not what I see. Cause I could be feel like nightmares, will they end? My reality's more friendly than pretend. And I don't know if my perception's innocent. I'm never satisfied, I'm looking to transcend. Real me gets confused with the clones I create on my own. My palace corridors to the lab, it's a throne. Pyramids of deception above the halls of a minty. If I leave, will I even miss me? Yeah. Face to face with my ambition, yeah. My position with me, I'm in competition, yeah. I could be superstitious, cause it feels like it's a sickness.